Good morning, everyone. Huva Uomenta. That's as much Finnish as you're going to get from me this morning. I'm sorry. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference. I really look forward to returning to Finland. I was here in May on a very interesting visit with Aya, and I was really much inspired by some very good conservation work that I saw at that time. So I'm thrilled to be with you here today. So thank you very much indeed. Wildlife in England, in Britain, is in trouble. A recent report, The State of Nature, showed that particular declines in wildlife were mainly on farmland. But we are already working with farmers and landowners across the UK, so I'm very optimistic that by working together, we can halt the decline and indeed reverse some of the declines in certain species. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about some of the work that we're doing with farmers in one particular part of England, which is Yorkshire. So just a few facts about the RSPB. We're known as the RSPB, but it's actually the Royal Society for Protection of Birds. If you look at our logo at the top, it's giving nature a home. So we're very much about nature these days, not just about birds. So when I go onto a farm, it's looking at the whole of the environment, not just the farmland birds, although the farmland birds can be an indicator of the wider health of the environment. So we've been around for just well over 100 years, 1.1 million members, so we're quite influential, 2,000 staff, but the most important thing is the 213 nature reserves that we have covering. That's actually gone up now to 150,000 hectares, of which 55% of that is owned by the Society. So we are in a position to be able to lead by example. This is one of our reserves. This is the Bempton Cliffs. So this is perhaps one of the nearest reserves to Finland. We're on the east coast here, and this is the area where I work. We work in a system called focus areas, where we give farm advice in particular regions of the country. And we've got about 20 of these scattered across the UK. The idea being it is to try and work on a landscape scale rather than just sort of be scattered across the landscape, to try and create habitats that are joined up, because bigger, better and joined up is a much better way of working. Wildlife knows no boundaries. Wildlife doesn't understand the boundary of a farm. So if we can work with whole groups of farmers, then we can create better habitats and improve the prospects for wildlife. We're working principally with farmers and landowners. Landowners sometimes can include people like quarry owners and factories, but essentially my work is with the landowning farming community. We're currently working with about 40 farmers across the region, across the Yorkshire Wolds and the coast. We're in touch with 120, and that number is growing. We recognise that working with farmers is very important. Farming in the UK represents 75% of the land use in the UK is farming. So although we've got the reserves, it's very important that we work with the farmers, because obviously we can improve the chances for wildlife by working in a wider landscape. So why are we working with farmers? Well, this graph, I won't dwell on this too much, but the bottom line, the red line, shows the decline in farmland bird species. 19 species of farmland birds that are measured by government through the Department of the Environment every year. And starting in 1970, using 100 as the starting line, you can see the steady decline in farmland birds. And that's why we've set up the work that we're doing to try and address that decline and reverse it. And with some degrees of success with certain species. We chose the focus area, chose the Yorkshire Wolds and Coast, because unlike some of the other habitats that we've heard about this morning, this is very intensively farmed. It's mostly arable land. It's some of the best land in the country. The farms are very profitable. Average farm size there is 209 hectares, but I'm working with several farms that are 4,000 hectares plus. Sort of 1,000 hectares is really quite common in this part of Yorkshire. Big businesses, big estates. It is intensively farmed. It is mostly arable. It's wheat, barley. We used to grow sugar beet, but that's now gone. Oilseed rape, and we grow vining peas for freezing. So it is the breadbasket of the UK, and the farmers see themselves very much as food producers, and trying to convince them that conservation is important is what we're about. And if we can convince farmers like these who are farming very intensively that wildlife management can work alongside intensive farming, then that's a message that will spread far and wide across the country, and that's what we're trying to do. Shooting is quite an important part of the landscape as well. Most of the farms and the estates have pheasant and red-legged partridge shoots. This is a fairly good example of a really big shooting estate where shooting is very much part of the culture. It's part of the social fabric. It does have some benefits for conservation in that there is a degree of predator control, particularly where it affects ground nesting birds, and they do grow crops for their pheasants and the partridges, which has benefits for wildlife as well. So we do work together with the shooting estates.
Excuse me, can you take it back?
Can I go back? Yeah.
Yeah, I just tell in Finnish that the red-legged partridge is punajalkapyy. Punajalkapyy. Joo, ja sitten peltopyy on grey partridge, jos se tulee tässä esille, ja pheasant on fasani. Kiitos.
Kiitos, thank you. Okay. The region that we work in is chalk. The underlying geology is chalk, which has been cut through by glacial meltwater, creating these wonderful valleys. And it's these valleys are particularly interesting from the biodiversity point of view, and are indeed owned by quite a lot of the farmers that we work with. So most of these chalk valleys are protected. They're sites of special scientific interest, which is an English, a UK designation, which protects them. So you get wonderful plants like these, and the marbled white butterfly, which I don't know what that is in Finnish, but ask me afterwards. The farmers we work with are really quite diverse. Most of them are arable. Richard Morell in this particular picture is an arable farmer, but he does manage one of these chalk dales. There's a really good example of how he's using his chalk dale to look after the wildlife that I showed you, the flowers and the butterflies, but also producing meat by grazing highland cattle on this floristically rich pasture, and then marketing the meat as coming from nature-friendly farming. So that's following a theme that we've already explored to a degree this morning. The theme of the conference is working together. So it is a question of us working with lots of other organisations. The farmers and landowners are obviously key. We use volunteers. We work with the government, gamekeepers and others. I won't go down that list, but just to give you an idea of what's involved in working on a project at this sort of scale involves lots of people and organisations to make it successful. We work with 10 species in particular, so these are the species that we're trying to enhance and to address the declines. Some of them are doing really well, some of them are not doing so well. So the turtle dove in the top picture there is in serious decline. It's one of the two migrant visitors, the yellow wagtail and the turtle dove. The others are all resident. So what we're trying to do is to provide safe nesting cover, winter food and insect food so that they can complete their life cycles on farmland, and we will hopefully improve populations. We work mainly with funding from the government through the government agency Natural England. That's using the Agri-Environment Scheme, which we now call the Countryside Stewardship Scheme, and that's divided into various levels, the higher tier and the mid-tier. It's quite a complicated scheme, and this is why we work with farmers, actually helping them with the applications, doing the paperwork and doing the mapping, and then helping those that are successful in getting agreements with implementing the plans to make sure they're successful. Most of them are 5-year agreements. And the work that, as it appears on the farm, can be very, very basic. It can be as simple as leaving a grass margin alongside a hedge or hedgerow management, which has real benefits for a whole range of wildlife. But it's actually the in-field, what we call the in-field options, which are really delivering. Things like nectar mix and wild bird seed mixes, for example, fallow plots, providing food and safe nesting places for wildlife. Some of you Finnish advisors were lucky enough to come and visit us in England a few years ago, and you probably met Ian Hurst in the middle there with talking about his farm, and I'll just show you some of the things that Ian is doing on his farm, which is making it a very successful project. He's got one of these chalk dales, which has been in the past fertilised. He's used fertiliser in the past to improve pasture growth and certain amount of herbicides. But as a result of him joining the higher tier of the agri-environment scheme, he's seen the management of that dale completely change, and he's restoring it to chalk grassland as much as he can, and it really is successful and working. And we use Ian Hurst as a demonstration farm, and it's a really good place to come and visit. This is an overview of his farm, looking across. So it's very typical of the area. Skylark plots are really quite unique. I will move quickly on because I've just had the 5 minutes thing. But these work really successful, and Ian has got about 100 of these on his farm. So if you're interested in these, ask me afterwards. But one of the main tools that we use to improve farmland bird populations is actually sowing wild bird seed mixes. And these are keeping birds thriving through the winter. These are actually grown by farmers as a specific crop. Here's one that's actually used as a game mix as well. So this is on a shooting estate, so dual purpose, serving pheasants and partridges as well as wild birds. Specific birds, this is the corn bunting, which requires a very specific mix. Here's one of our farmers, John Harrison, where he's grown a cereal-based mix to draw the corn bunting into nest in it. We also monitor the crops that we're growing for birds as well, because it's important that we're growing the right species of plants in that crop and that the right birds are choosing them. So we do monitor that, and this is some scientific work going on here. Providing nectar for pollinators is very important, because that's creating the insect resource to feed birds, particularly feeding their young, and these nectar mixes do work. We have the cocksfoot moth on daisy. Oxeye daisy. Providing safe nesting cover is important. That can be as simple as putting up nest boxes on farms. But more important for birds like this one, the lapwing, Vanellus, which we have seen serious declines, and it's a species that's very popular with farmers. It's a bird that they can identify with, very much a farmland bird. And we are seeing great success on farms where they're using this as using fallow plots to provide safe nesting cover for lapwing, where the field is left uncropped for the year for the birds to nest on. Hedgerow management and verge management, very important for birds like the yellowhammer. And what we do, because we're working with at least 40 farmers, at least 40 of those farms are being surveyed as well. So we actually monitor our results to see whether the work that we're doing is actually delivering results. And we do that using volunteers who visit the farm at the farmer's request, and we will visit that 4 times in a year and survey the farm and provide the farmer with a map and a short report, followed up by a visit from myself. And then we will revisit that farm in year 4. So after 3 years of monitoring, we will go back to see whether the work that we have done has actually delivered results. And here we are with a farmer, his agronomist, his conservation manager. So this is the 4,000 hectare farm that I was telling you about. It's a bit of a luxury to have a conservation manager working on the farm. And my colleague Tina on the far left, who's in charge of our volunteers and looks after them. Very successful. It works very well, and it gets the message across that we need to do some work for improving farmland biodiversity. One of the spin-offs of the scheme is that we can look after rare arable plants as well. This is a particular margin that's being cultivated particularly for grey partridge, Perdix, which is a game bird in the UK, and is also a target species for us because we're seriously worried about its decline. But one of the benefits is that we can work with other organisations. This is Plant Life and Bug Life, 2 other NGOs that we work with quite a lot. And that, as a result, we can work with farmers to encourage rare arable plants. I know the English names for those, but I'm sorry I don't know the Finnish names, but some of you botanists might well be able to inform me afterwards. But field cowwheat and blue pimpernel, they're quite rare plants which were removed by herbicide use and are now coming back as a result of agri-environment schemes, and the Yorkshire Wolds is a bit of a stronghold for these rare arable plants. So I'll leave you with that slide where, as I say, the whole theme of our work is to provide habitat the year round to so that birds can breed successfully. But not just birds, it's wider wildlife. And if I had longer, I would show you lots of other things that we're doing. But this is sort of going into the winter on a typical Yorkshire Wolds farm where we have wild bird seed mix in the foreground to feed those birds through the winter. Safe cover there for all sorts of overwintering insects on the right. And looking across into the distance, we've got a lot of pollinator mixes which are now sitting there waiting for the spring and to flourish and provide food for a whole range of wildlife. So this is very much a very working farm in that the arable land is delivering food for the population, for the nation, but at the same time providing really valuable habitats on the margins. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. And here is a copy of the book for you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay, now some questions and comments for Chris.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting.
Good.
I'm Johanna Helkimo from ELY Center from Northern Ostrobotnia in Finland. And I would like to ask, is there discussions in your area or in England about the effects of organic farming in biodiversity? And did I understand right that these farms were conventional that you were working with? Or
yes, they're all conventional. Yeah. Organic farming is quite a minority in the UK. There are clear benefits from organic farming. I think I probably work with two. The obvious benefits are that you're not using herbicides and pesticides and inorganic fertilizer. As regards diversity, yes, we probably do see more diversity on arable farms. Some of the organic grassland farms, there can be issues with the use of slurry, for example, where you've got intensive livestock units. But yeah, organic farming, it does have a future, and we've got some real people who are full of enthusiasm, which you've probably heard about. But it is very much in the minority.
Thank you. Some more comments, questions?
I have one here. Thank you, sir. I'm Irina Herson from the University of Helsinki. And to my experience, one of the challenges that we are facing whenever we grow something for biodiversity with farmers is that at the same time we also have a risk of growing weeds, or what farmers call as weeds.
Yes.
It's very difficult to grow something good without also promoting something what is not wanted on the field.
Indeed, yes.
At least with time, it may not be this year, next year, and so forth. So how are you dealing with this? Yeah,
it's a good question. Particularly when we're growing wild bird seed mixes, it's quite a difficult option to encourage farmers to do because they do have this tidy mentality. And that's not, tidiness is not a crime, but it's actually not that good for biodiversity. And where you do get a build-up of weeds in these wild bird seed mixes, there's an option to grow a biennial wild bird seed mix, and that seems to be the one where we get the weed burden, where the build-up of weeds. So we're promoting farmers to actually grow these crops on an annual basis, to resow the seed every year in the spring. Therefore, that gives them a period to fallow the plot and also to rotate them around the farm to keep them clean. We wouldn't allow the use of insecticides within these crops, but in certain circumstances you can use herbicides to control grasses, for example. We might use a graminicide within one of these wild bird seed mixes to control grasses. That's certainly the case in some of the nectar and the pollen nectar mixes. We would use a graminicide to stop the legumes from being overwhelmed by grass weeds. But it is an issue, yes, it is. You're right.
Yes, thank you very much. We have some more questions.
Hi, I'm Tiina Jalkanen from Metsähallitus Parks and Wildlife Finland. You mentioned that you give free advice to farmers. And I'm thinking, is there other instances who provide this kind of service? And what is the main motivation for the farmers to seek, especially your help?
Yes, several questions there. There are other people that give advice. So professional land agents and consultants who would charge for that advice. Why do we give it for free? You could argue, well, if it's free, it can't be that good. So some farmers might say that. We give free advice because it gives us an option to get onto farms, and even if we don't have immediate influence, it does at least gives us an opportunity to talk to those farmers and influence them. We don't compete with those giving advice and who charge. I work alongside a lot of land agents, and I would give the agent the free advice. So the agent would be working for the farmer, and I would be advising the agents, and that way we avoid any competition between those advisors and consultants who are trying to make a living from doing what we're doing. So yeah, we're not there to compete, we're there to help.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we will continue now. Thank you, Chris.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.